Well, good morning. This is Ian R. Crane. It's the morning of Friday, 6th of April 2018. And it's been a week since I did my last morning live stream. And of course, we've had Easter in between. And we've had an earthquake in Surrey, apparently, more of which later. But in the course of this week, of course, it's been absolutely fascinating to see the government narrative on the alleged poisoning of Sergei Skripal and his daughter Yulia literally fall apart. And no real surprise here, because those who are critical thinkers were able to look for the evidence. And of course, Jeremy Corbyn was very much on point in Parliament of demanding the evidence, which of course led to him being demonised in the media and having to resort to claims of anti-Semitism and the usual old chestnuts of Holocaust denial, which are trotted out whenever the establishment is trying to undermine the integrity and credibility of a commentator that has basically caught them out. And of course, Jeremy has handled that with tremendous dignity. And you know, the reality is that the media has demonstrated that it is incapable of any genuine investigative journalism, and that unfortunately investigations are a thing of the past. And now all that happens is the hired hacks literally cut and paste the narratives that are put out from the respective PR departments in the government. So it's going to continue to fall apart, and fortunately, you know, more and more people around the country now are starting to realise that basically they cannot trust anything that comes out of the mouths of their elected representatives, and neither can they take at face value anything that is published in the media, and that they have to actually put a little bit of effort in to do their own research. And of course, the anti-fracking community has very much been on point for the last 5 years. And what is so wonderful about the anti-fracking campaign is that it has created one of the fastest growing social movements that this country has seen in many, many years. And what it has taught people is that if your government and your elected representatives and the corporations can lie so blatantly about something such as fracking, where there's some nearly 2 decades of evidence from around the world, then what else are they lying about? Well, I'm just going to sum that up in one word, or actually 3 words: pretty much everything. So the critical element is to do your own research. And it's a little under 3 weeks now since I first mentioned 5G in these early morning live stream updates. It was Monday the 19th of March. And the reason that I did that on the 19th of March was because for the first time in the British media, there had been a report linking the issue of 5G with trees and the problems associated with trees. Now, having just said that the media doesn't necessarily tell the whole truth, there are occasions when they slip in something which they want people to have some subconscious awareness of, but not to take it too literally. Well, I had been waiting for something like this for a while, because I'm also aware that when you want to reach a wider audience, then the trigger is often people seeing it in the mainstream media, because for the wider audience, that's where they still get their information. So that gave me the opportunity to make the link. Well, what a storm has unleashed in that time. And I've certainly been on the receiving end of some brickbats from people not just in the Sheffield area but elsewhere, saying, no, there's no relationship between the culling of trees and 5G. Well, what is my mantra? Do your own research. And of course, this is something that the establishment and the corporations, do not want people to do. They do not want people to be capable of critical thought. Well, on last night's episode of Humanity versus Insanity, which was episode number 103, my guest was Mark Steele. Now, Mark Steele is based up in the northeast in Gateshead, and Mark has been on a mission for some months now to try to raise awareness of the pernicious 5G agenda. And he's basically taking the same stance that we take in the anti-fracking community, which is, don't take our word for it, do your own research. And Mark's information that he is putting out there and encouraging people to look at is truly compelling. Now, Mark had met with resistance amongst the Sheffield tree action community when he first broached this subject with them some months ago, and a phenomenal amount of effort was put in to effectively making sure that he didn't get any traction. And it's become very, very clear that there are elements, as one would expect, because there's so much money at stake, there are elements within the tree activist community that are making a phenomenal effort to try and prevent anyone actually making the link between the culling of 17,500 trees in Sheffield alone and the rollout of 5G. Well, I think that that's now falling apart. But as I said last night during the discussion, it's really important that the people of Sheffield who are united in their concern about the decimation, or more than decimation, the halving of their tree population, that they don't actually get into a pissing match about whether or not it's related to 5G. So we're going to have probably two groups or more emerging in Sheffield. Those that say the culling of trees has nothing at all to do with 5G. We actually trust what the council and what Amy are telling us, and it's purely related to issues with the roads and disease. Okay, well, that's your view. But, the key issue is that you are concerned about the culling of trees. And then there will be those people who put in the time, the effort, and use their capacity of discretion and discernment to come to their own realization that actually, you don't need to cull 17,500 trees just to maintain the highway, the quality of the highways. Or there's no way that half the trees in Sheffield are diseased. So just do what you know is right. Obviously encourage people to do their own research, but nonetheless you are united with the other group in the desire to cut down the trees. The concern will be those people who clearly make an effort to try to shut down any discussion and debate about the relationship between the tree culling and 5G. And by the way, it's becoming increasingly clear that Sheffield is effectively the distraction. I mean, it's a very, very serious distraction, but the media coverage is centred on Sheffield and the culling of trees in Sheffield. Meanwhile, we are learning that trees are being culled in towns and cities right across the country. Not perhaps quite so visibly, but anywhere where there is a systemic campaign to remove trees, then it's really important that people look at who has been contracted and what the terms and conditions of those contracts are, and looking for the links between the tree removal and 5G, because the evidence is very, very compelling and we should be concerned. 5 years ago the anti-fracking community was embryonic, and there were a few thousand perhaps people around the country who were aware of the threat to the ecology. Now that's tens, if not hundreds of thousands of people, maybe even millions around the UK who have done their research. And it will be the same with 5G. But the difference is that whereas, with the fracking, then, we had perhaps, a limited amount of time, but we've dragged it out for 5 years. Well, the 2020 target date for 5G rollout in this country is just 2 years away. And of course, unlike fracking, which primarily targets the north of England, with a few pockets in the south and southeast, 5G will affect the entire country. And I do encourage people to watch the discussion, whether it's my discussion with Mark Steele last night or other discussions that Mark's had on social media with other commentators. But Mark presented the evidence linking 5G with the decimation of the bee population, and actually has proven through Freedom of Information requests that the Environment Agency have been lying about having researched and having data on the impact on the bee population by electromagnetic frequencies. He's also presented the evidence linking teen suicides and the rising tide of dementia with the push to introduce ever faster and higher frequency telecom networks. And it's a little over a decade ago now since the spate of teen suicides in Bridgend. And between January 2007 and February 2009, there were 26 teen suicides in Bridgend in South Wales. And all but one of those teen suicides, and these were young people between the ages of 13 and 17, all but one was by hanging. And there has never been any establishment inquiry into that spate of teen suicides. There's been suggestions of put forward, but there has not been any formal investigation. Yet there were two researchers from different areas who looked at the evidence that was in the public domain, and one came up with the observation that every one of those teen suicides was either on or had recently been on a course of Ritalin, which is a very pernicious drug that is prescribed for ADHD and is known to cause changes in the brain chemistry. The other researcher was a guy called Barry Trower, who actually lives not too far from where I'm standing right now. And Barry Trower is a former government scientist who, over the past decade or so, has become increasingly concerned about the rising tide of electromagnetic frequencies within the environment. And Barry Trower came up with the observation that every one of those teen suicides lived in close proximity to a phone mast. And he was asking questions about whether or not there was some experiment being carried out in the Bridgend area which led or contributed to these teen suicides. Well, consider actually both of these investigations could have got very close to the mark, maybe even hit the nail on the head. Maybe it's the combination of the Ritalin and the increased EMF that led to the problems. And as is always the case, some people are more susceptible than others. And Mark also made the observation about the rise of dementia. And look at the push that's being pumped out ever since David Cameron and even Theresa May talking about the need for focus on mental health. Police forces, I think it's North Yorkshire, have on the side of their vehicles that they are dementia friendly, whatever that might be. I haven't noticed North Yorkshire police being particularly friendly about anyone or anything, but dementia, apparently they're dementia friendly, so it says on the side of their vehicles. So this is sowing the seeds. And Mark makes the observation that there are certainly people who know what the likely impact of this rollout, this 5G rollout, is going to be, and for whatever reason it's an irrelevance to them, because their primary focus is corporate profitability. Well, as Mark said last night, where are they going to get this profit from if basically there's nobody capable of working, nobody capable of earning money, and nobody capable perhaps of even remembering that they owe somebody money. So this is something that is serious, very, very serious, and it really is time that people started taking note. And just as fracking is something that occurs deep beneath our feet, but we've seen from elsewhere in the world the devastation that's caused by this industry, you know, we now need to start taking a look and get our heads out of our phones and start taking a look at what's occurring. And just like fracking, you know, we can't see the electromagnetic frequencies, but you know, those of us who are somewhat sensitive to these frequencies know that we sleep better when we're in an environment which is not being bombarded by Wi-Fi signals. So I know that some people are going to go, oh my God, you know, this is just another rampant conspiracy theory. And that's, of course, exactly what the establishment and the corporations want you to think. As long as they can stop you or prevent you from taking a look for yourself until such time as they get it all rolled out, and then they ain't going to switch it off. It's too late. There's way too much money involved here, which is why, you know, one would argue that for the corporations, it would be remiss of them not to put a few people into the activist community to try to derail any discussion about 5G. You know, the Amy tree removal contract alone is reportedly worth something in the region of £2.2 billion. Well, obviously, you know, the Amy relationship with Telefonica should also be investigated. And then, you know, the potential benefits to the corporations in terms of this 5G rollout, with over 500,000 transmitters being needed to make this work effectively. So, you know, pay a few grand to put in a few agents provocateurs or infiltrators to shut down the debate. It's a no-brainer. Of course, they're going to do it. But, you know, we can deal with that. Just marginalise them. Pete, don't get bogged down in the debate with people who are trying to prevent you raising awareness of this. Just marginalise them. You know, the crucial population that we need to reach out to are the increasing tide of critical thinkers. And every time the government shoots itself in the foot by putting out narratives that just don't stack up, where there's not a single shred of evidence, or the story keeps changing, all of this actually helps people to come to the realization that this blind faith that they have in the establishment is misplaced and actually is certainly not good for their health. So 5G is going to be more than the new fracking. You know, we haven't nailed the fracking issue yet, but you know, we've got to also take account of the fact that 5G is potentially a much greater threat than fracking. The combination of the two is one of Armageddon. So either wake up and get involved, or go bury your head in the sand, you know, because the reality is we don't need everybody to come to the realization of what's occurring. Just something in the region of, you know, 5 to 8% of the population, and, you know, to ask 5 to 8% of the population to embrace critical thought and actually determine for themselves whether or not this environment is something they want to pass on to future generations is probably, I hope, not too much to ask. Well, I said I'd touch on the earthquake, and I'm going to put more time into that on Monday. But of course, the earthquake that was reported centred on Newdigate, just outside Dorking in Surrey, and it was 7 years to the day on April the 1st. 7 years to the day since the first recorded seismic event in the Blackpool area, which ultimately led to the moratorium being put on fracking activity in the UK. And of course, ultimately it was effectively determined that Quadrilla were indeed responsible for triggering those seismic events. But the questions are already being asked. Although there hasn't been any fracking activity in the southeast, but has the drilling activity over the last few years, particularly by UCOG, has the drilling activity in the southeast actually contributed to this earthquake, which was of an order of magnitude actually greater than any of the recorded events in the Blackpool area 7 years ago. So on that basis alone, perhaps Greg Clark or whomever, whichever government department ultimately has the responsibility perhaps it's time to call a moratorium on any further activity in the southeast until it can be established once and for all that that earthquake is a standalone event and has nothing to do with the drilling. And of course, if it does have anything to do with the drilling, that moratorium ultimately needs to become a ban. But I want to do a little bit more research on that over the weekend, and I would encourage you also to do your own research. And you know, let's come together to create an environment that our generation can actually be proud to be passing on to, you know, the young people coming through. But right now, that's certainly not the case. And what we are potentially leaving them really doesn't bear thinking about. So thanks for joining me. And, you know, I'll try not to take too many more week-long breaks. Otherwise, my email inbox fills up rather rapidly with people asking where these live streams are. But I will be back on Monday at 8:30. Meanwhile, if you can spare a bit of time, then please take a look at my discussion with Mark Steele on last night's episode of Humanity versus Insanity. It's already available on my Facebook pages, and it will be available on YouTube within the next couple of hours or so. So you guys have a great weekend. Use a bit of that time to do a bit of research, and let's make sure that the British establishment knows that thanks to their incompetence and their agenda of lies, deceit and obfuscation, the British public are finally waking up and are not just going to roll over and allow you to decimate this country. So thanks again, and I'll catch you on Monday morning.